Hello, hello. If I could learn how to spell YouTube, it'd probably help. Hello to everyone and no one, whoever is or isn't there. I'm going to go to one of my favorite channels here. This is SEA, which I believe is like... Actually, I'm going to go to the channel and it'll probably describe it. SEA space. It was like space something. I can't remember what it was. Anyways, this is one of my favorite channels. I will oftentimes find myself literally just putting on. Oh, I keep trying to start that video. Putting on one of the playlists or putting on, one of these videos or have them run back to back and just like fall asleep to them all the time. But yeah, if you're somebody who's interested in space, this guy is the best. They're very well produced videos, great audio. Most of the videos actually start with like a little thing that says best listen to in headphones or something like that. But he covers just about every topic having to do with cosmology and astronomy and science, space science and stuff. It's one of my favorites here, The Great Attractor. This one is really good to watch. If you kind of want to be creeped out by space. Actually, several of them are. The Oort Cloud. This one's really good. The scale of everything is incredible. This is what I'm talking about when I say it kind of blows my mind the way we talk. Well, the way scientists talk about space in academia and stuff, as if they know everything. When you watch this video. Maybe we'll watch that. There's a new video I wanted to watch, so that was why I pulled this up. But if you were to watch this video, it's really good. The Oort Cloud. Actually, I'm going to drop the link for that. Just because it's awesome. Anyways, if you were to watch this video, it really gives you kind of goosebumps when you think about the scale of the universe. And this is only describing something that is part of our solar system. It makes you just feel very, very small. And when you see something like that, it kind of blows your mind. You go like, wait, and yet they think they know like everything about the universe? Give me just a second. I'll pull up the chat. I need to eventually, I think one of the things I need to do is get a can I detach the chat and keep it pop out chat? Anyways, for now I'm going to drop the link to the Orc Cloud video from SEA. It's really awesome. One of the things I'm going to need to do to upgrade my streaming situation here is probably a second screen at some point. Kind of a no-brainer for anybody doing streaming, I guess. I have a laptop. It's pretty decent. But I could definitely get a cheap monitor at some point and hook it up as a secondary. Do I have enough ports for that? I think I do. Anyways, then I could do like the full screen browser. I do this just for my, I mean, I'm sure I could full screen the browser, but the reason I don't is because I want to be able to monitor the Streamlabs as well. I just saw what happened when I full screened it. Like a giant watermark. Anyways, so yeah, this is a fantastic channel. He describes things in a way that if you don't know a whole lot about space sciences, you'll pretty much get it. Like he's very good at educating. And the guy's got a really good voice, very articulate. Just an awesome channel overall. Deserves a lot more attention. I mean, 608,000 subscribers is good, but anyways, I've seen like all these videos multiple times. This is his brand new one. It's been a couple months since he put out a video, and he seemed to be pretty excited about this, so I wanted to check it out. And I think that's what we're gonna do.
When you're launching a new...
We're not going to listen to ads. For best experience, use headphones, it says.
The Earth, the blue planet, an ancient oasis of life suspended in the darkness of space. Throughout its long, chaotic history, it has experienced countless drastic changes which have profoundly shaped its destiny. And now, after almost 5 billion years, you are here. As rich and
Makes it all
illustrious
dramatic
as this
too.
world is today, it was once nothing more than a column of dust, dancing inside a scorched cyclone of stellar gas which ignited the sun.
I apologize, I don't have it on the top
managed
quality
to
because I just want to make sure the
transition
stream
from
stays
said dust
stable.
to this living world of unfathomable complexity and depth makes up the topic of our video today. So join us as we wind the cosmic clock backwards billions of years, from you and I today all the way back to the birth of the solar system, when Earth was nothing more than a burning, barren wasteland.
I feel like he was pretty excited about this, talking about it launching, and you are here. So probably it sounds like it's gonna be pretty extensive. I mean, it's a 40+ minute video. I think that was one of his longer videos.
Our story begins 4.5 billion years ago, when the universe was about 9.3 billion years old. We know
Yes,
this
well,
because
we've
the very
discussed
oldest
that.
rock formations we have found are roughly that old. Rocks have a fantastic way of telling us their age through the process of radiometric dating. By making use of the consistent rate of radioactive decay in rock...
I also just want to say, like, if I make any comments contrary to what he's saying about things like radioactive decay, which has been shown to not be the most accurate way of dating, it's not to like be in disagreement with him or to say he's wrong. He is, this is the way I would see it, he is using the best available science that is essentially given to everyone, the best available information, and he's not really here, from what I gather, to question the science. He's here to just kind of be a purveyor of science and these really cool concepts. So when I say anything critical of any of the methodologies or whatever, any of the information, it has nothing to do with SEA.
Formations, we can extrapolate with great precision when they were last hot. And Earth's oldest rock was blisteringly hot around 4.5 billion years ago. Back then, the infant sun was only just beginning to shine, erupting beams of energy which dispelled the incubating envelope of gas surrounding it during its formation. This gas then recollected in orbit around the star and over about 10 million years condensed to form the solar system's planets. On the inside of the young system, it would have been far too hot to facilitate the icy buildup of giant planets like Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. Instead, all that could condense this close to the young sun were rock molecules, culminating in the accretion of about 30 sub-Earth-sized molten planetary embryos once the solar system had taken shape. These rocky bodies then began colliding under the influence of gravity, obliterating one another and blasting most of them to smithereens. After a few tens of millions of years, the debris from this age had concentrated further into a handful of terrestrial protoplanets vying for a place in the sun.
If you're not
Among
listening
them,
on
the young
headphones, like I
smouldering
am
Earth.
using earbuds, it's totally worth it.
Its
Just
mass had become
first
so
of all, his
great
voice
that
comes through very
heavy
well, but
elements and metals
the
near
ambience
surface started
is really good.
sinking towards the center of the planet, establishing Earth's internal layered structure and slowly switching on its protective magnetic field. As heat continued to swirl and bubble beneath the tortured surface, volcanic activity ravaged and reshaped the face of the planet, blanketing it with sediment. Driving away the early light elements left over from the formation of the sun, it replaced them with a thick, choking atmospheric layer of toxic greenhouse gases, particularly nitrogen, carbon dioxide, and methane. And yet, even despite the hellish conditions of the Hadean era, Earth still managed to support a familiar
Hadean era,
sight
I
on
like
its
that.
molten surface.
I've actually never heard that term
liquid
before. That's pretty
water.
cool. Makes sense.
But this ancient body of water would have been roasting, acidic, and standing much higher than sea levels today, and it soon boiled away to fill the atmosphere with water vapour. It was only after global temperatures had fallen, several hundreds of millions of years later, that this vapour was able to condense. And just under 4 billion years ago, at the end of the Hadean era, clouds gathered in its ancient sky before raining down every day for over 100,000 years. This downpour
Could you
refilled
imagine?
the parched basins left by the progenitor ocean and completed its transition from scorched molten rock to a blue planet covered in liquid water, signalling the start of the second of Earth's 4 great eons, the Archean period. It was in this age that Earth would see its defining characteristic arise, like a phoenix from the ashes. Life woke for the first time on the planet. As asteroids continued to bombard the surface of the terrestrial worlds, Earth's oceans provided a new, unlikely source of shelter on their seabeds. Furthermore, as convection currents swirled in the mantle below, hydrothermal activity punched through the ocean floor, erupting mineral-rich
Like
deposits
he's
and
really
bursts
giving
of
like
heat.
the whole history of Earth type deal here.
Exposed to the cold of the ocean, these eruptions almost instantly condensed into tower-like structures of precipitate, resembling miniature seabed volcanoes, known as hydrothermal vents. And it is within the sheltered pockets and grooves of these towers where we believe life on Earth first emerged.
It's kind of interesting because for the longest
Though
time
it
we
might
didn't even
seem
think
like
life
a
could
hostile
survive in these
environment for
places.
something as delicate as the first life forms, these vents actually made the perfect laboratories for abiogenesis, providing energy through their excess heat, a source of chemical compounds in the mineral-rich ejecta, and finally a solvent, the seawater, for mixing things and facilitating chemical reactions. And with the prerequisites for an awakening of life now falling into place, complex chemical reactions began to ensue. Under such conditions, freshly synthesized organic compounds would have started clustering into aggregate molecules known as protobionts, which somehow started to coordinate their behaviors. We still don't really know how, let alone why, but it would seem that an accumulation of complexity over time would have developed these molecules further.
Sorry, I think things
until
got
some
hung up there for a
3.8
second.
billion years ago, when an irreversible threshold was crossed. Whether there was one awakening or several remains a topic of debate among scientists to this day. But in any case, the first recognizable organisms emerged in these vents, and Earth was now a living world.
I see. That's what like gives you hope when you're looking at like these alien planets and stuff. You know, we often take data, spectrographic data from, let's say, extrasolar worlds. I know there's another term. I just forgot it. Anyways, we'll take like these extrasolar worlds, and we'll take the spectrographic data, and we'll analyze the gravitational effect on the host star, all these different things, and we'll try to determine the mass of the planets and where, how far from the star they are, and what the chemical composition of their atmosphere might be, and use all that to determine, what kind of world this could be. But the variety of places where life can survive on this planet is, there's almost no place. And when you think of like the billions of planets throughout our galaxy, there may be other bodies in this solar system that host life. So I think when you think of things like the life forming at these geothermal vents and life existing in some of the most barren, inhospitable places on Earth, well, kind of adds variety to where it could exist elsewhere.
The first life forms would have constituted extremely primitive bacterial cells, known as prokaryotes. Single-celled organisms which lacked nuclei and reproduced via the simplest forms of binary fission and fragmentation. In any case, the prokaryote population started to expand until it was able to move out of the hydrothermal vents, and two distinct domains of life were established, to which everything that has ever existed traces its lineage: bacteria and archaea.
Well, don't we all have the best
in
common
size and
ancestors?
structure, these two varieties of cells went on to colonize and rule the oceans for more than 1.5 billion years, accumulating on the surface of rocks in sheet-like colonies of microbial mats,
Just like 1.5 billion
which over
years
time
of
were petrified
stinky
and remain
oceans.
preserved in the fossil record today. A few contrasting species and subvarieties emerged, coexisting and interacting to give rise to the first evolutionary adaptations. And within 400 million years, a new species of algae-like microbe known as cyanobacteria stopped sourcing its energy from the heat spewing up from Earth's.
Like, think about the time spans we're looking at here. 400 million years. Like, I think I was talking about either on the podcast or one of the streams. It's all starting to kind of blend together now. But we're talking about like the age of the universe possibly being 26.7 billion years because of, these possibly accelerated time spans for development of stars and galaxies in the early universe. And that's in like 300 million years. So like if you compare and contrast these things, we're talking the kind of time frame that supposedly at the beginning of the universe it took for galaxy formation to begin is the amount of time that these things like dominated the oceans and were evolving.
Vents, and instead floated upwards into shallower waters to bask
Like, we just
in the
can't
light
even
of the sun.
grasp these time
This
frames.
game-changing new ability, known as photosynthesis, allowed the cyanobacteria to explode in number in the shallow depths, blanketing Earth's oceans in a slimy green coating.
Ew.
The first algal bloom was in full swing as the Archean period drew to a close some 2.5 billion years ago, the sun setting on an extraordinary age of innovation and evolution. And the next of Earth's great chapters, the Proterozoic period, the longest of the four lasting 2 billion years, would see yet more strides towards the emergence of complex life, driven by a number of seismic changes to Earth's atmosphere. As mentioned, Earth's early atmosphere consisted largely of greenhouse gases, with its share of oxygen so essential for life
I
today,
just realized that
accounting for less
the
than 0.01%, with most of the biologically produced oxygen pumped out by the cyanobacteria absorbed by the Earth's oceans.
yeah, the ambient mode is on. When I
But
was looking
heading
at the
into
stream.
the Proterozoic period, these
Looks okay.
oceans began to freeze, and the atmosphere cooled along with them. 2.2 billion years ago, the first of two great ice ages engulfed the planet. As temperatures plummeted, even greater expanses of the ocean froze, and the exchange of gases between the sea and sky was constrained, leading to a reduction in atmospheric carbon dioxide, causing the greenhouse effect to wane.
You mean that's happened before?
With less CO2, the planet's temperatures fell even further, meaning more ice built up on the ocean's surface, which reflected a greater amount of sunlight, driving an even colder climate still. Before long, a runaway snowball Earth event was
That's
in
what I was going to say. I
motion,
think this is
as
where
its
we had the
glaciers
snowball Earth.
migrated all the way down to the equator,
Could you imagine, like,
encasing the entire
I
planet.
mean, obviously
in a
these are
shell
simulated
of
images
solid
here, but
ice.
just imagine just seeing that, like witnessing that.
And with the oceans completely locked away, oxygen could now begin accumulating in the atmosphere, raising its concentration to around 1%. While it might sound like a negligible increase, the gas was now over 100 times more prevalent than before the aptly named Great Oxidation event, and had risen so unsustainably in the air and ocean that it wreaked havoc on most of the anaerobically respiring biosphere. The Archaea family were the most affected, with around 80% of its cells dying off as a result of this oxygen catastrophe.
Survival of the fittest.
Those that remained were forced to either alter their structures to tolerate oxygen or risk vanishing altogether. And thus, the first instance of evolution via survival of the fittest occurred.
I have not watched this before.
Those archaeal
Spoiler
cells
alerts.
with random mutations that happened to accommodate oxygen enabled them to survive and reproduce, while the more conventional, poorly suited cells perished. And so, the Archaea family was pruned by natural selection, incentivizing life to take its next great step, as a new subdomain of archaeal cell emerged, known as the eukaryote.
Now,
Substantially larger
remember, this
and
took
more
billions
complex
of
than its
years to get
bacterial
to
and
this
archaeal
point.
counterparts, eukaryotes were also the first cells to house a nucleus, capable of storing and sharing genetic information. Though they initially reproduced asexually via mitosis, it was these cells that evolved the first sexual reproduction. And ever since, they have come to encompass large swathes of the modern-day biosphere, as the principal cell type of humans,
this is stream
animals,
friendly still.
plants, and fungi. And for a further 1.5 billion years, these cells quietly established themselves in Earth's oceans, as they were gripped by yet another
Just
snowball event.
Billions of years. No big deal.
This second Great Ice Age enabled the level of free oxygen in the atmosphere to jump once more, to a considerable share of more than 10%. But before long, A surge in volcanic activity was pushing back, melting this icy shell and replenishing CO2 lost from the atmosphere. As the planet defrosted once more, Earth's oceans were now ready to unlock perhaps the single most important adaptation of modern life.
Modern
Multicellularity.
life. Almost a billion years ago. Modern.
Multicellular aggregations would amplify the potential of life on this planet immeasurably. And at the end of the second ice age around 600 million years ago, it was poised to take off in a big way. In fact, multicellular creatures are believed to have evolved independently on this planet at least 25 times over the course of its history, including multiple times for plants.
I mean, that makes sense. If it's going to happen once, it can happen again and again.
Earth's oceans suddenly became much more accommodating to self-determining aggregations.
And obviously,
of microbes.
at certain periods, it's gonna
This
fail
due to a number of factors coming into alignment,
and then restart.
One being the abundant free oxygen now lingering in Earth's atmosphere. Another would have likely been the chemical enrichment of Earth's oceans, as eroding continental crust washed new minerals into the sea. Both factors are thought to have played a crucial role in developing the next building block of life, amino acids.
Just slowly but surely over a couple
Organic
billion years
molecules
turns into
containing
a
oxygen
nice
that make up
bath
the
of
basis
life.
of proteins, and in turn, the twisted fibers binding together complex creatures. By the end of the Proterozoic period, 540 million years ago, an abundance of the compound collagen was racking up in shallow seas and was starting to influence cellular life. Laboratory experiments have proven beyond reasonable doubt that cells cluster and reproduce much more vigorously in the presence of collagen. It forms a sort of net.
But seriously, can you imagine the smell of like ancient Earth oceans? Like, it started as just these bacterial mats, and now you got like proteins and collagens. Like, I'm sure they've simulated this or something, but am I the only person thinking about this?
Over groups of microbes, which allowed them to shape the first cell tissues. Initially, this facilitated the appearance of poorly adapted slug-like aggregations of cells known as egrecs. But with more cells came more room for error when reproducing the organism, allowing for a wider range of more diverse adaptations, the best of which would have been quickly teased out by natural selection. And
if you're just joining and watching a video by SEA, really
eons,
fantastic
the ongoing
YouTube channel. He just published a new kind of big project of his today called You Are Here. It's about kind of the history of Earth.
And the stage was set for a biological Big Bang of complex life. And about 530 million years ago, we do indeed find evidence
We're
of
getting
such
closer.
awakening imprinted all over
Just
the
half a
fossil
billion
record
years.
as we enter the Cambrian period. Also known as the Cambrian explosion, most of the animal body plans, or phyla, that we see on Earth today emerged within this comparatively brief 15 million year window. The biological destiny of life
This was like a
sealed for
time where the
hundreds
Earth
of
became
millions
like
of years to come,
infested
as
with
it's bred the first familiar
life experimentation.
characteristics, like hard exoskeletons, tails and eyes to accompany the ability to move. Brains became larger, with skulls forming around them.
Are you sure about
followed
that?
soon after by jaws and backbones. Plankton populations began skyrocketing, establishing the bases of the first food chains. Around the same time, we begin to see bites appearing in the fossil record.
Wait, what?
Within a food...
No, I want to see that.
Plankton populations began skyrocketing, establishing the bases of the first food chains. Around the same time, we begin to see bites appear.
Well, that's kind of cool. I guess I would have never noticed that. Like right here. So there was
appearing in
predatory
the fossil
behavior going on.
record. Within a food chain comes winners and losers, predators and prey. Suddenly, traits such
And
as
they
speed,
looked nothing like
stealth, and
this.
subtlety became desirable. And before long, a fully fledged biological arms race was underway. This arms race is best illustrated by the plight of the trilobite family, one of the earliest complex life forms to conquer the ocean floor. These beetle-like creatures had a hard, segmented shell, and though they started out
Some of the
blind and
coolest looking
immobile,
fossils too.
necessity soon spawned their ability to see, move, and eventually swim freely.
I like that description.
They spread out
Beetle-like.
across most of the planet, evolving more than 20,000 distinct species over 50 million years.
My gosh.
And over the course of this progression, their adaptations grew more and more defensive. They sprouted spines and grew horns, and their exoskeletons turned to armor. And all of this was likely in response to the emerging challenges of their new environment, including the first well-adapted predator to roam the high seas, Anomalocaris. This creature was among the first to have claws.
I have a Pokemon that looks like
and
that.
a peculiar, rounded mouth on the underside of its body, both of which would have been useful in cracking open the shells of its prey. Thus, the earliest populations of slow, swimless trilobites were hunted to extinction, while their slippery, spiny descendants continued to flourish. Another creature that was able to evade the tyranny of Anomalocaris was a small, eel-like creature known as Pikaia. While only about 5 centimeters in length, and lacking any defensive adaptations, it did have one particular enhancement which would eventually become central to the animal kingdom: a long, hard backbone running through the center of its body.
Gross and backbone.
This allowed the Pikaia to glide through the ocean currents to escape its predators, allowing it
Pretty
to
cool
successfully evade capture and eventually reproduce. Thus, we see the vertebrate body plan beginning to feature more prominently in the fossil record from here on out, eventually enabling the evolution of another of the ocean's long-term mainstays: fish. Fish began appearing in the fossil record about 50 million years after the Cambrian explosion, but the first generation were poorly suited to their environment. One of their earliest known species, Arandaspis, possessed a relatively streamlined vertebrate body, but lacked fins, and thus would have been an incompetent
Maybe more
swimmer.
like a tadpole.
It also lacked a
flopping
movable
around.
jaw, and relied on sucking the seabed to extract microbes for sustenance.
Might have been cool though
The
to
species
watch
soon
in
became a
nature.
food source for larger, later, better adapted fish which could swim adeptly, and that did have jaws which allowed them to bite their prey. Seeking sanctuary from the increasingly perilous depths of the ocean floor, these preyed-upon fishes were driven from their original habitats towards freshwater environments such as lakes, rivers, and estuaries. Unfortunately for them, however, freshwater was toxic to most marine life.
They just like
The
arrive and are like,
saline
oh my
content of
god, what's
seawater
going on?
played
Why
an
am I dying?
important role in regulating the mineral content of cells, without which they would start to rupture and die off. Therefore, any fish that dared venture into a freshwater habitat risked a slow, painful, and protracted death. That was until one species, perhaps the Pteraspis, managed to make the first
hell is that
permanent leap to fresh water by evolving a kidney within their body capable of pumping strenuous substances out of the bloodstream. But this new environment brought other challenges along with it: fast currents, jagged rocks, and steep drops. This necessitated the need for new freshwater adaptations, such as lighter and more muscular fish, with survivable skeletons contained inside the body. and fins which would not tear or rupture so easily.
And this is when
And it
nature
would be
learned
these
that skeletons
adaptations,
belong on the inside.
particularly the latter, that would start these freshwater creatures down the path to their greatest conquest yet, walking on the land. By this time, the floral kingdom of plants was already achieving mastery of land environments. Shrubbery was widespread across the early
Shrubbery.
supercontinents,
I like the way he says that. Shrubbery.
covering them in swampy wetlands. And perhaps as early as 420 million years ago, at the start of the Devonian period, the arthropods, the descendants of trilobites and ancestors of modern-day insects, beetles, spiders, shellfish and millipedes, began crawling out of these wetland habitats and onto dry land. Ironically, their hard, lightweight exoskeletons and excess of legs made them well suited to this new environment, prompting natural selection to quickly elevate land-conquering adaptations. Larger creatures,
Good
however,
job, guys. You
would
have
have
arrived.
no such luck, and it would be tens of millions of years more before the first amphibians would take steps on the land.
And that's where we
Their
all came
journey
from.
began in the swamps, filled with pools of murky, stagnant water. Thus, ancestral species of fish found benefit in being able to poke their heads out of the water, to breathe air when necessary. And it was this ability that started to extract the first reptilian
The background music is
traits
actually
from
like
these
really
early
good.
fish.
Always
Longer
is,
heads
but
and more maneuverable necks, and eventually stronger fins that started to look more like limbs. One of the earliest amphibious creatures, Acanthostega, was the birthplace of a number of these features, with 4 sprawling legs where its fins were once located, each with no less than 8 spiny fingers.
what?
Though this would have greatly impaired its ability to swim, Acanthostega found success in using its limbs to meander across the riverbed into shallow protected areas covered by fallen tree branches, which it could also use to hoist itself out of the water for the occasional breath of fresh air.
It's like,
But
I
it
want to
was
be
not
a
this
dinosaur.
creature that would be the first to crawl out of the ocean, as the configuration of its limbs would not have allowed it to support its body weight without the buoyancy of water. Instead, another of its limbed relatives,
So it would have just kind of like
Ichthyostega, is thought
flopped
to have
around.
been among the first creatures to attempt the transition, when it took no less than 260 steps on land in a swamp at the foot of the prehistoric Caledonian mountain belt, supporting its body weight all the while. What enticed the creature to dry land remains a mystery, but in any case, and like the insect population,
some of these things we
once
find
these creatures
from the fossil
discovered the
record,
relatively untapped,
like
nutrient-rich
obviously the fossils
ecosystem
themselves, but then
unfolding on the land,
footprints
there
and
was
all
no
that sort of thing.
going
It's
back.
crazy how much of that was
And natural selection quickly transcribed
lost to
terrestrial
geological events.
adaptations, such as lungs and land breathing, into their genetic
So when we
codes.
find it, like it's kind of a big deal, I think.
Before long, these creatures were unrecognizable as fish and looked more like lizards. And indeed, the rise of reptiles would come to characterize much of the next 300 million years. With life
Let's
now
see if he
walking
gets
the land,
dinosaurs right.
the Devonian period, often dubbed the Age of Fish, came to an end, and so began the Carboniferous period, the age of the supercontinent.
I love the whole history
Around
of supercontinents and the
360
whole
million years
concept.
ago, the 3 progenitor continents that existed on Earth, Gondwana, Euramerica, and Siberia, started slotting together to birth the principal supercontinent, Pangaea. A new, sprawling, unified landmass now existed to be explored, and life had not seen such an opportunity for growth since the Cambrian period. At first, Pangaea was prowled by a family of so-called mammal-like reptiles, including a menacing Komodo dragon-sized lizard that came to be the dominant land predator for tens of millions of years. But over the course of the Carboniferous period, distinctions within this family started to appear, as reptiles and mammals differentiated from one another. As life continued experimenting with different biological
That's what I was talking about
blueprints,
in
it wasn't
the podcast
long
earlier.
before a new class of animal emerged, the amniote clade.
Shared
Constituting
common
an
ancestors,
extensive
but
variety
everything
of
is
four-limbed
continuously
creatures
branching away from each
identified
other.
by the presence of certain life-supporting adaptations. Within this order, terrestrial life would diverge into two distinct types: sauropsids, the ancestors of reptiles and birds, and synapsids, the ancestors of mammals like us. The former was propelled to the summit of the terrestrial biosphere by a number of new groundbreaking adaptations, most notably the ability to lay eggs as a means of reproduction. This allowed the Sauropsida and their offspring much more freedom to roam their territory during their mating periods. Synapsids, meanwhile, were experiencing their own breadth of evolution, as we start to see the emergence of bizarre, transitional creatures on the fossil record,
I feel like that's
known as TheRelaxedMovement.
I feel like that's something that's not explored enough in. It doesn't get the kind of attention, obviously, that like the dinosaurs and the more reptilian type creatures and stuff do. And it's not to say those aren't like extremely interesting. And as a huge fan of dinosaurs and paleontology, I'm fine with it. But it is kind of interesting that there are these entire like families of creature unrelated to dinosaurs and other mammals and such, that just don't get talked about. Like the animal kingdom of this period was kind of insane.
With a variety of different builds, head shapes, and jaw structures, this peculiar family evolved the first mammalian departures from their reptilian counterparts.
That's a really interesting.
Most notably, a set of limbs which extended underneath the body as opposed to sprawling out either side, like lizards. One member of this family in particular, the Cynodont,
Oh, that's cute.
is often at...
It totally looks like a Pokemon. I'm sure there's a Pokemon that's based on this concept. Like there's so many Pokemon now, but that's adorable. Keep one as a pet.
attributed as the last common ancestor of the family Mammalia forms, constituting all present-day mammals and their extinct relatives. But the Cynodont was generally quite small and meek, and
Aww.
often preyed upon by larger, more vicious reptilian
With the
creatures.
picture having the dragonfly, often preyed upon by
But
dragonflies.
around 300 million years ago, at the end of the Carboniferous period, Earth's biosphere began to collapse, catalyzed by a gathering storm of devastating factors. Climate change, habitat loss,
Wait,
and
what?
the changing geology
But
of Pangaea
we weren't
meant that
there.
the Permian
How was the
period
climate
that
changing?
followed was marred by ecological disasters and extinctions, starting with the fall of the rainforest ecosystem. Earth's relatively cosmopolitan distribution of jungles began to fracture, fragment, and recede, while something even more catastrophic was brewing deep below the surface. Partway through the Permian period, Earth experienced one of its most significant volcanic events ever. Forming the landmass today known as the Siberian Traps, this eruption lasted more than 2 million years and loaded Earth's delicate atmospheric balance with strenuous amounts of carbon dioxide. Global temperatures rocketed to unsustainable levels, with both marine and terrestrial ecosystems affected. Earth's remaining jungles were decimated, with its trees almost vanishing from the fossil record entirely, along with many different species of Synapsida and Sauropsida. In total, the Permian period saw no less than 3 distinct episodes of mass extinction over 50 million years, culminating with the single most deadly die-off on record, the Late Permian Extinction Event.
This is what I'm
During
saying.
this
Like
fatal chapter alone, 57% of all biological families were lost, including 70% of terrestrial life and 81% of marine life.
Like, life has restarted
By
here
the time the Permian
so
period
many
was
times.
over, the biosphere had been reduced by a skin-crawling 95%, bringing it to the very brink of eradication. But among the many casualties, there were survivors. In fact, it only took around 10 million years following
Squirrels?
the end of this great die-off for trees to bounce back and recover across much of Pangaea. And soon after, the mammalian descendants of cynodonts began returning to the surface from the shelter of their burrows below. But the rule of reptiles on land was far from over, because another survivor from this age were lizard-like reptiles with avian lineage, which would go on to spread and recolonize the land during the Triassic period, eventually evolving into the family we today know as the dinosaurs.
Which were separate of avians and reptiles. They
The
didn't evolve
earliest
into them.
recognizable dinosaurs started appearing in the fossil record around 245 million years ago, but they were a far cry from the gigantic beasts we've come to associate them with. Closer in size to a chicken than a T-Rex, it took around 30 or 40 million years, and a number of favours from Mother Nature, for dinosaurs to establish themselves as the dominant terrestrial force. Around this time, the supercontinent Pangaea began to fracture, initially breaking into two large sub-supercontinents, which would slowly break apart into the 7 contemporary continents we know today. The ever-changing geology and temperature of the Earth drove yet another mass extinction event, which whittled terrestrial life down to only flying reptiles, such as the pterosaurs, the ancestors of crocodiles, and a selection of dinosaurs, marking the end of the Triassic period and the start of the Jurassic period. And over the next 150 million years, leading into the Cretaceous period, dinosaurs would spread to all parts of Earth, spanning millions of different species with a myriad of different body plans. Among them, some of the fiercest and most iconic predators ever to walk the Earth.
It's just incredible how long these
The
creatures
Tyrannosaurus rex
ran
and
the planet.
Velociraptor are often touted as instances of such apex predators, primarily due to their significance in the Jurassic Park film series.
Yes.
But in truth, these movies exaggerated the abilities of the two types of creatures somewhat.
Oh, here we go.
The Velociraptor, in particular, would only have been the size of a turkey, and not the 2-meter door-opening SOBs we see in the film. Their design was actually based on a much older predator, Deinonychus, a sleek, agile runner that could grow up to 3.5 meters in length. Its discovery derailed the mid-20th century perception that dinosaurs were almost exclusively gigantic, slow-moving creatures like the Argentinosaurus, which may have been able to grow up to 35 meters long based on skeletal reconstructions.
I'm not a huge fan of the whole skeletal reconstruction
At such
thing.
sizes, it would have been hard to imagine
We do a lot of
what could
filling in the
possibly
blanks.
bring down this kingdom of giants. But something certainly did, as they all but vanish from the fossil record around 66 million years ago. But it wasn't natural climate change or volcanism that drove the dinosaurs to extinction. In fact, the apocalypse this time arrived from outer space, as an enormous 10-mile-wide asteroid plunged into the land that is now Mexico. Travelling at a speed of some 45,000 miles per hour on impact,
Good
it
God.
struck with the force of 100 million Hiroshima atomic bombs, releasing a catastrophic tsunami of fire and water, which decimated the
It's
land,
just
acidified the oceans, and extinguished the light of the
unfathomable.
sun in a nuclear winter event. Driven by the collapse of photosynthesis and marine ecosystems, about 3/4 of all life on Earth was once again wiped out, including the near total obliteration of the dinosaurs. But once again, there were survivors to this stint of the apocalypse, particularly the rodent-like ancestors of modern mammals, which had already spent much of the last 150 million years hiding to avoid their reptilian overlords. And for the first time,
Mammals
these
just waiting
creatures
their
could now
turn.
venture up onto the forest floors as a new age of mammals started to dawn. Mammals rose to the top of the food chain for the very first time and were soon hunting other mammals for food. The safest creatures were now those who ventured away from the forest floor, perhaps into the thick, shady canopies of trees. And thus, at this point, we see the family of primates starting to emerge.
There we are.
With some familiar adaptations, like curving thumbs on 5-fingered hands, suitable for holding onto and swinging through tree branches.
This is where our story begins.
As this family diversified, a plethora of new lineages emerged, including the family of monkeys around 50 million years ago. Today, they have a distinct place in the biosphere, spanning a broad range of species set apart by the size of their brains and impressive cognitive abilities. And over many millions of years, their increasing size bore the family of apes, where the earliest recognizable ancestors of humanity would emerge. Fast forward to around 2.5 million years ago, and we see the first human-like beings of the genus Homo. Among the earliest were the Homo habilis, the first type of primate to begin shaping stones into tools like hooks. This culminated with the discovery.
This is where I always say human intelligence essentially began with the need to eat meat. Just saying. We started developing tools to hunt, or protect ourselves, and then eat whatever we killed. So yeah, I 100% believe that that's where human intelligence really began, was the need to eat meat.
And mastery of fire about 1.5 million years ago, completing our transition from mostly scavenger beings to efficient apex predators. Soon after, a new species of so-called upstanding ape, the Homo erectus, emerged, with a flatter face, a neater nose, a more upright posture, and an even larger brain. They were clever enough to fashion the first serious tools, which allowed them to hunt and kill medium to large-sized animals, like bovines and elephants. One species of their descendants...
There was a time where we had to hunt bovines.
which emerged around 770,000 years ago, and is thought to be the most recent common ancestor between humans and Neanderthals. Fast forward again to around 300,000 years ago, and the lineage of Homo sapiens starts to appear, with the most complex brains yet, sophisticated enough to drive sentience, as well as innovative new ways to master their environments. 165,000 years ago, Homo sapiens were urbanizing the areas near water, making use of complex tools to catch and cook shellfish. And the practice of fishing would become invaluable to the prosperity of human colonies until about 12,000 years ago, when the innovation of farming plants and animals took its place. This enabled humans to spread out to new areas and explore their planet like never before. Championed by the perfection of rafts, boats, and maritime navigation, humans spread to all 7 continents. And from there, the preservation of human history makes things a bit easier to trace. The rise of contemporary cultural practices and modern religions, ancient Egypt, Greece, and Rome, the Ottoman Empire, the Middle Ages and the scourge of the Black Death, the American separation from Britain, World Wars I and II. over the last 3,000 years, we've written a comparatively brief, yet extensively detailed chapter in the history of this planet, and not all of it is to be proud of. But for better or worse, it has all been leading to this moment. And now you are here. Every single one of us represents an unimaginably tiny, yet every bit as important piece of the puzzle constituting the greatest mystery in the universe. The mystery of life and why it exists.
It just does. It doesn't need a why.
But no matter what else happens, life has had to wade tirelessly through all of its impossibilities, its twists and turns, its awakenings and its extinctions, to get to you. So no matter what tomorrow brings, always remember that you are here for a reason.
Well,
As we have seen today, even the tiniest inanimate shifts have the power to drastically change the world with time. As sentient beings, we have no excuse. So go out there and spread joy under an ancient sky, and make tomorrow the day that really counts. And with that, I bid you good night. C signing out.
C. Oh, I always thought he would say it SEA. I think that's the first time I've ever heard him say the channel name on the on here. Good video. Not my favorite. But not because it's not well made or interesting. Yeah, I think for me, obviously I find the things are a little bit more exploratory of actual space to be of more interest. But it's a good video. Obviously, like I said, it's something that he was excited to do. He put it up on his community section here. Going back a bit. I'll have to go vote on this later. But anyways, so up here, this was 2 days ago, and he was like, it's been so long since my last video, but the wait is over, and I'm sure it was worth it. My longest video, my biggest project, my favorite topic, and over a year in the making. Your Here is live now. So like, that's really cool. You know, I'm always for people doing like their passion projects and something that is important to them, and I'm glad he did. But what this channel to me is something else. It's, you know, this stuff, like deep in the dark recesses of space, and, you know, talking about what's beyond the observable universe, or just being able to sit and imagine. Like, obviously the video we just watched was you're going through these time spans, right? But it feels very accelerated at the same time, because obviously he doesn't want to do a video that's millions of years long, and there's only so much of that history that you can, you know, speak about and it not, you know, become boring. So you do have to kind of accelerate in some ways. So when you're talking about the passage of time, it's very hard to, you know, a concept to get people to wrap their heads around, because the only true amount of time that you can actually grasp is the amount of time that you've existed for. Anything beyond that, and you're having to use your imagination, right? If you're 35 years old, then it's fairly easy for you to imagine what 5 years is, what 10 years is, what 20 years is, you know, etc. If you are 35 years old and you're talking about millions of years, it's like, wow, that's a huge number. But you also have no perspective on what millions of years would be like. So you do have to sit and do a little bit of work in an imaginary sense to grasp what the billions of years of global evolution that have gone on to reach this point. And so it's a nice little walkthrough. Probably best for like normies, I suppose, to get like a little history lesson on the planet and evolution and where everything kind of came from. But when you get into this kind of stuff, to me, this is a little bit more mind expanding, you know, to sit and talk about what will the solar system be like at the end, you know, when it goes to die off. How will that play out? Or, you know, the Great Attractor. I love this one. I think it was one of the first videos I actually seen of C, but talking about like why a huge swath of our universe, our local universe, is all kind of moving in this same direction and what's guiding it there, and just sitting there and just thinking about that. Things that will never actually matter to you as a human being, but you have this desire to be able to perceive the motions of the universe. And he does a really good job of like presenting that stuff. I really like this channel. So good video. I'm glad he got this big project out. I'm a fan of the channel. I'm a fan of the dude. I think, you know, his channel is going to continue to grow and he's going to make really cool stuff here. I have a feeling that he's going to, if he's not already, that he's going to end up involved in doing other presentations, like documentary projects or something like that, you know? Jesus, 66 million views. Good for you. Got merchandise? The C store. It's not a bad t-shirt. Tumbler. A pillow. That's kind of cool. Out of this world. Yeah, I like that. That's pretty neat. Aliens, black holes, mysteries, and theories. Oh, Out of This World was this space series. I gotcha. So then what did C stand for? I can't remember, because SEA space. Does he have another channel? I feel like he would have linked it on his... No. Fascinating. Well, that was cool. I don't think this is going to be... Oops, excuse me. I don't think this is going to be a drastically long stream. I actually want to go eat. And I got to get up and go to the gym tomorrow. And then perhaps I will do a longer stream tomorrow. I might start a little bit earlier. I don't think there's anybody... I don't think there's anybody here right now. But if there is anybody here, or if you watch the video on demand, like I said, I will be streaming again soon. So I got things to do tomorrow. It's my day off. But then I'll work till Tuesday evening. So I might start a little earlier tomorrow evening. I like to do like a midnight type thing. I feel like it draws like, well, hasn't really drawn anybody yet, but I feel like I'm a night owl. That's when I'm at my most creative, my most communicative, and when I want to do things like this. So I feel like that will stay the trend, you know, somewhere about midnight is where it started. This one started a little late, but somewhere about midnight is when pre-stream, or just before midnight is where pre-stream should begin, and then I'll get in here as quick as I can. And yeah, so anyways, hope you enjoyed the stream, whether you were here for any period of time or if you check this out in the video on demand. And check out SEA or C space. I think it's like C_space. if I use anybody's content, like, you know, I don't know if I would say I used his content, but like, you know, if I watch somebody's content on here, I'm gonna try and welcome them. So yeah, on YouTube at SEA_space. Check out his channel. Pretty awesome. Yeah, I appreciate the many nights of falling asleep listening to videos about black holes and the end of the universe and such. So, all right, guys, that's going to be it for me tonight. Yep, hit me up on social media. I am primarily on Instagram and Threads, and then, of course, here on YouTube. But if you want to communicate with me in a more personal way, Threads or Instagram is going to be the place to go. So, see you next time.